What is happening to BiggerPockets? This is Matt Faircloth. So today we're going to talk about analyzing deals and the things that people overlook when they analyze deals. I've been analyzing deals for a long time. I've analyzed a lot of deals, and I've overlooked stuff sometimes in my beginning years when I overlook deals. And I talk to a lot of people about analyzing deals that they have, and sometimes ask questions like, "Oh yeah, I didn't think of that." So here are the top 5, let's say the top 5 most overlooked areas when you're analyzing a deal, because my hope is that you guys think of these things when you guys analyze deals and you don't overlook them, because they are factors that contribute to your deal being successful or it being a good deal or a bad deal. So let's hop in, okay? So the first thing are the taxes. Okay, now some people assume, well, taxes, they're going to be what they're going to be. They are, but you want to consider when they may change. The real estate taxes on the properties do change over time. Like we bought a property in central Pennsylvania, and the township or the county comes through and reassesses every 15 years. We happen to be buying right at the end of that 15-year cycle, which means that they were going to reevaluate again. So I called the tax assessor and asked him what he thought the taxes were going to be on the property, and he actually was able to give me a number, and we had a good conversation. And had we not thought of, well, the taxes, may change on this property at a certain time, and how often do they change? We wouldn't have known that every 15 years they do, and that we were end of a 15-year cycle. So when you guys are analyzing a deal, look at what the taxes are now. That is a consideration. But also consider when they change, because most towns change the real estate tax assessment or change the way that the properties are taxed every certain amount of time. Could be every 5 years, could be every 1 year. There's some states that every time the property sells, the tax valuation automatically changes to what the property sold for. So you could be looking at a property that's valued at $100,000 because that's the last time it sold, that's what it sold for. But that sale could have been 15 years ago, and the market's changed a lot in the last 15 years. So maybe you're looking to buy the property for $500,000, right? That will 5 times your taxes if you're buying in a state that does that values the property immediately based on the sell price. So consider how taxes change over time, or how your sale will trigger a sale in taxes. And of course, the last side of it, if you feel like the taxes are too high on a property, that might not be a reason to walk away. You can actually reassess you can appeal the taxes. You can have them reassessed. You can contact the local assessor and say, hey, I'm looking at 123 Main Street, and the taxes are, $8,000, and I looked at other deals in that area and they were all at $4,000. So can you tell me why it's higher, or what I can do to have the taxes perhaps reduced if I did buy that property? So taxes is a consideration. They're dynamic, they change, and you need to consider how that change in the taxes over time, the real estate taxes, will affect your cash flow on the property. So next thing, current expenses is the thing that people don't think about all the time. And when I say that people overlook them, is you either will, what people tend to do is they'll get from the current owner what the current expenses are. Okay, so how much is the heating bill? Okay, I'll put that in. How much are you paying for insurance? Okay, I'll put that in. How much are you paying for water? Okay, I'll put that in my assessment, right? So they assume that the current expenses on the property, I'm going to write the word expenses there, current expenses, right, are static, and that you can't affect those. So if you look at it and you notice the water bill is a little high, well, could I put in low flow toilets and low flow shower heads and reduce the water expense? Are all the tenants paying the heat, or is the owner paying the heat, and that could get transferred over to the tenants very easily? Would my insurance carrier give me a better deal than this person's insurance carrier is giving them? So evaluate the expenses on the property and view them as that's what they're paying. And if I operate the property the way that I want to, are those expenses, especially the utilities and insurance, is that going to go up or down based on how I plan on operating the property? So I'm not saying people don't think about the expenses and the utilities and insurance and stuff like that on a property. They don't overlook that. But what you may overlook is the current status of the insurance and the expenses and the utilities are all based on the current owner's operation strategy. May not be based on the way you're going to operate the property, so consider that. And also, this isn't even an overlook, this is in the expenses column, but if they're self-managing, they're probably not going to show you a management line item, and if you're going to sub out management, this probably goes without saying, but make sure your management company's fee is in there. And last thing on current expenses, do not assume that you're going to pay what they pay for maintenance, because maintenance is one of those things that people tend to not disclose all the money they pay for maintenance, and they might not peel that, they might, water that down. There's also a ton of rules of thumb, especially on bigger multi, on how much the maintenance line item should be. It's like, well, $500 a door is about right, or $600 a door, or $500, there's all kinds of numbers that get thrown out there per door on what it costs to maintain a property like this. Who you want to ask is your property management company. To say like, hey, this is what I'm buying, this is what the condition that it's in. What is it going to cost to maintain it? And not just to maintain it, but to maybe bring it up a bit. And that brings me to my next conversation, which is turn cost, okay? Now, this is obviously a factor. You hear a lot of people talk about this on multifamily, saying like, well, I'm going to upgrade or do value add, which everybody talks about value add now in multifamily. But if you're going to do, improvements to units as tenants move out, you most likely have something in your budget for doing these renovations, for upgrading the units as you go, right? But this turn cost actually gets factored into single family homes too. If you have a single family home, right, odds are the tenant's not going to move out on, one tenant's not going to move out on the 31st, and the new tenant's going to move in on the next day on the 1st, and then maybe they're going to high five each other on the driveway, one in, one out. You're going to have downtime. And on single family homes, the biggest mistake, the biggest overlook that people do on single family homes is they underestimate how long it's going to take to turn that unit and to get a new tenant in, right? The most common thing people do is put in 5% vacancy rate. 5% vacancy rate is BS in almost every market, because it's either a little less if it's a really great market, or it's a lot more. On a single family home, 1 month's rent is 8%. So already if one tenant moves out and it takes you 1 month to renovate and release the apartment to a new tenant, you're sitting vacant for 1 month. If you have a single family home deal and your vacancy rate is 5%, forget it. You've overlooked the turn cost, and it should be at least 8. If you really want to be conservative, you should underwrite it at 16% and see where you're at for vacancy, because that's just 16% of your rent roll for the whole year is 2 months rent. So there is a shot that on a single family home you could lose 2 months rent. So food for thought. But the cost to turn includes how much you have to pay to renovate, which on single family homes is typically a little more, and also on the downtime that you are when the unit's being turned and when you're remarketing. Okay, so actual turn cost is something that people overlook, and people love to drop in rules of thumb and 5% and everything like that. And I can promise you, you're going to have to renovate even an apartment building. You have to do something when tenants move out, even to spruce it. So it's going to cost you a few bucks to turn apartments. So turn cost is another overlooked area when analyzing a deal. Okay, the next thing, and these are kind of taking your glasses off as an owner, these next two are taking your glasses off as an owner and starting to look at the property as a tenant would. So, maybe you've rented before in your life and you've looked at rentals, and so start pretending that you're looking at a property as if you're a rental, even if it's not an area that you personally would lease. Look at it as your tenants would. And the first thing that your tenants are going to consider that you want to look at when you're looking at a rental property is proximity to assets. Okay, what that means is you want to find something you can brag on your property about. Now, we'll get to the next one in a second here about you can brag on the inside of the property, but with regards to location, like, is your property close to the mall? Is it close to a lot of jobs? Is it close to the highway, to where they can access it for easy commuting? Is it close to the baseball stadium? Is it close to restaurants and bars and coffee shops and a cool little spot that somebody wants to walk to those types of assets might want to live near? Or is it out in the middle of nowhere? Or is it across the street from the dump? Or is it, down the street from a sewage treatment plant that you can smell when you're on the front porch, okay? If you're just evaluating on, net operating income and cash on cash return and cap rate and everything like that, you're not looking at a property as a tenant. You need to look at it as a landlord. I get it. And so when you look at it from a property owner's perspective, all those things come in, and you think about like taxes and current expenses and the turn cost and all, and what the net operating income is and cap rate and all that stuff. Okay, so take those glasses off for a second and realize if there's something that's undesirable right around the property that they might not want to be around. Even like we turned down a deal recently that had a huge bunch of bank of power lines coming right by the property. What's true or not, and again, you don't have to get into the debate on whether or not this is a real thing, but that's an undesirable thing for people to live under, whether the effect of it is there or not, of living under power lines. a lot of people don't want to. And so when tenants come out to look at the property, even it could be like the best cash on cash deal ever, the best cap rate and everything like that. But when you look at it, you're like, people aren't going to want to live next to that, so I'll pass. So proximity to assets or proximity to things that are like, downers that you don't want to be near. So just proximity to things that are of interest. Okay, let's call that one. That's the next factor. And the last one is unit flow. Okay. Now this is maybe hard to do if you guys are evaluating properties remote, but I'm sure the realtor could send you lots of pictures and unit unit layouts and things like that if you're evaluating properties remotely. But unit flow means like, does this kitchen feel practical? When I go in the property, is this a good usable space? Is this something that like, is there enough closets? Are the bedrooms super, super small? Or does it feel like a warm, welcoming place where we're going to want to entertain or have their family over, or that they're going to want to stay in long term? And like when your tenants move into this place, and say, you know what, I love it. I love that it's close to my job and it's a cool place that I can have a little back porch and have a barbecue or have my friends come over or have my kids running around in the yard, and I'm willing to stay here for the next 6 to 7 years, and I'll pay my landlord's rent increases when they send them to me because I love where I live. So unit flow is a consideration because they could also look at the place and say, this doesn't make sense. There's no place to put my dishes. We looked at a property one time that had no upper cabinets. Like all the cabinets were down here, none up here. So there's no place to put dishes, right? Now, you can add those and things like that, but a tenant is going to look at that and go, so where do I put my coffee mug, right? Now, as a cash perspective, as a cash on cash returns perspective, it made perfect sense that the deal made, look like it made money. But from a functionality standpoint, it wasn't really functional, and unit flow didn't make sense. So just look at it from the tenant's eyes. Never do a deal where if there's more than one bedroom and there's not a full bathtub. We looked at a 2-bedroom apartment one time where there was a shower stall, and that precludes most people that rent 2 bedrooms have a kid. My son's only 4 years old. He's not showering and he's not going to be in a shower stall. He wants a tub, right, with his rubber ducky, okay? So make sure that there's a spot for the kid with the rubber ducky because they're not going to want to use a shower stall in that. So consider that. It's okay in a 1-bedroom. It's okay in a studio because typically that's a single person that's using a space like that. But consider unit flow and picture yourself or picture a person living in that unit and what functionality things are they going to want to see. Okay, so these are the 5 things that are overlooked. These are ones that I see. When you guys watch this video, if you made it this far, leave a comment down the bottom about places that you think are overlooked, or maybe dispute me on these, whatever you want. Places that, or perhaps even better, places that you guys thinks that are overlooked on deals when you guys have evaluated, maybe something that you did overlook and you wish you had thought of, or that when you've talked to somebody else, things that you have come up that sometimes people don't think of, but they really should be thinking of. So cool. That's what I got, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great and profitable week.